Hello, and welcome back to Educator.com's Introduction to PHP course. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking about two new data types that we haven't talked about before, the Boolean data type and the null data type. As part of talking about the Boolean data type and the null data type, we're also going to go over what are known as comparison operators. So we're going to be introducing a new class of operators. Previously, we had worked with arithmetic operators, the concatenation operator. We had introduced those a few lessons ago. We're going to learn a few more operators today. And then we're also going to briefly just talk about coding conventions as it relates to these two data types. So what is a Boolean data type? Well, a Boolean data type is one of the four scalar data types in PHP. We've worked with three of them already, the integer, the float, and the string. The Boolean is the fourth scalar data type, which is a data type for representing single values. And a Boolean is used to represent a truth value, and meaning it's either true or false. It's one or the other. Booleans, or bools as they are commonly referred to, are used extensively throughout our code, and we're going to be using them from this lesson onward all the time. They're the output of comparison operations, and mentioned a minute ago we're going to be learning about the comparison operators in this lesson. They're also the output of many functions, and so we're going to be dealing with these Boolean values all the time. In PHP there are two Boolean literals that you can assign to a Boolean variable, and they're the special keywords true and false. True and false are treated in a case-insensitive manner by PHP, so you could do them in any case that you want to. Typically, the convention is to do them either all uppercase or all lowercase, like this. So let's take a look at a sample file, a PHP file called booleans.php that demonstrates some of these, demonstrates the use of Boolean variables. First thing we're going to do is do a var dump function on both of the Boolean literals, the Boolean literal true and the Boolean literal false. And that's going to show you how to specify the Boolean literals, which is you just write them in the code in all capital letters, all lowercase letters, just as is, and the PHP interpreter knows to interpret them. It knows they're not like strings or anything like that. They're special reserved words. And var dump, as we know, it outputs the type and the value of whatever piece of data is passed to it. So when we var dump on the true value and the false value, we should see that it's a Boolean, and we should see that they're equal to true and false. So if we go and load this page up, you can ignore this part down here, we haven't got there yet. You can see the true literal is, and that literal is a bool data type as we expected, and its value is true as expected. At the same time, the false literal is interpreted as a Boolean, and it's the false value, just as expected. Now you can also assign, as we're going to be commonly doing, you can assign Boolean literals to variables, and then you can assign a variable that has a Boolean value to another variable. So for example, here we have three variables we've created. One is called testbool1. We set it to the Boolean literal value true. We have testbool2, which we've set to the Boolean literal value false. And then we've created one called assignbool, where we've basically just done an assignment operation, which is saying assign the value of testbool1 to assignbool. So it's going to be true. And then we just use the var dump function on all of these different variables. And if we go and look at the output, we can see testbool1 is a Boolean data type, it's true. Testbool2 is a Boolean data type, it's false. And assignbool is a Boolean data type of value true. So comparison operators, what are they? Well, as the name implies, they're used for comparing two different data values. They're binary operators, and because they're binary operators, as we know with binary operators, they operate on two expressions. And as an operator, it takes expressions as input and it generates an expression as an output. The output of a comparison operation is a Boolean value. And basically what it does is it compares the values, and if depending on the different comparison operators we're going to talk about, if the comparison is valid, it outputs true. If it's not, it outputs false. Now PHP has several common comparison operators. There's the equal operator, which is two equal signs, not one. The single equal sign is mentioned down here is the assignment operator, which we've worked at before. The equal comparison operator, which compares the value of two variables, is not the same. It's two equal signs, and that's sometimes a common problem with new programmers to PHP is getting mixed up with using one equal sign versus two. So one equal sign is an assignment operator. Two equal signs is the equal comparison operator. And we're going to see what that looks like in code in a minute. And what that's for doing is to compare if two values, the two operands of that operator are equal or not. There's also the not equal operator, which is a exclamation point followed by an equal sign. There's an optional convention to also use the less than and greater than symbols. It's not as commonly used, and in this course we're actually going to be using this one exclusively. And what the not equal operator does is compares the two operands that it's given, and if they're not equal, it outputs true. If they are equal, it outputs false. Then we have the greater than and less than comparison operators. And what those do is they return true if for example, for the greater than, if the operand on the left is greater than the one on the right, it returns true. If it's not, it returns false. And then there are two other versions of each of those, the greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, which does the same sort of comparison but allows the value to be equal as well. So you could say 2 is greater than or equal to 2. The answer would be true because it's not greater than, but it's equal to 2. And the greater than or equal to operator looks like this, and the less than or equal to operator looks like that. If you remember back from math, this is how it used to be written, greater than or equal to, and then the less than or equal to was written like this. And so the equivalents of these are these operators here. So let's take a look at, we have some code here that demonstrates all of the different operators, and basically I've gone through and all of the different operators that we just mentioned, shown some different examples of how they work. And rather than looking at the code, we'll look at what the output of it looks like. And here we see the output of some comparison operations. The equal operation, basically the way it works is you have one operand or one value, you have the equal comparison operator, and then you have the other operand. And basically what it does is it compares those two values. If they're equal, it returns true. So as in this case, 1 is equal to 1, that's true. 1 is equal to 2, that's not equal, so it returns false. You can do it the same for all the different data types. So for like the float, for example, 1.0, is that equal to 1.0? True, but 1.0 is not equal to 2.0. So as you can see from these comparison operations, they make a comparison and then they output a Boolean value as a result. You can see some string comparisons here. And one thing you can note is that the comparison operation for strings is case sensitive. So here we have hello. We're comparing it to the other string hello, and that's going to return true because they're the same. But down here we have hello beginning with, that's an all lowercase, and then we have hello with the first letter capitalized, and as you can see that's going to return the value of false. The string has to be exactly the same character for character. You can also compare Boolean values. So in this case, we're comparing the Boolean literals we just learned about. Is true equal to true? Yes. So the result of that comparison is true. Is true equal to false? No. The output is false. Now the not equal operator is just the opposite of the equal operator. If the two values it's comparing are not equal, it returns true. If they are equal, it returns false. So basically all the examples that we had up here in the not equal operator, they have the opposite result. And if you can see, if you look down, every result is the opposite one. For example, true is not equal to true. That's false. They are equal. 1.0 is not equal to 1.0. That's false because they are equal. So now move on to the greater than and greater than or equal to symbols, or comparison operators. We can see how they work. Basically, it's an operand and the operator and the right operand. And 2 is greater than 1 is true. 2 is greater than 3 is false. And because this is not a greater than or equal to operator, 2 is greater than 2 is also going to return false because it's not greater than 2. Down here we've done the same examples, but we've used the greater than or equal to operator. So 2 is greater than or equal to 1 is still going to return true. 2 is greater than or equal to 3 is going to return false. But 2 is greater than or equal to 2 is going to return true. And that's because of the additional constraint of it being equal. and then the same thing applies down here for the less than or equal to. The same exact operations, but just in reverse as far as it's a less than or a less than or equal to operation. Now, PHP also has two other comparison operators known as the identical and not identical operator. Basically, all the other comparison operators we had talked about compare the values of the two operands. It compares the value on the left to the value on the right, and if they're the same, it outputs true or false, or depending on what the comparison is. The identical ones are similar to the equal and not equal operator, except not only do they compare the values of the two operands, but they also compare their data types. So not only do the values have to be the same, they have to be, for example, the number 1. For 1 to be equal to 1, they both have to be the same number, but they also have to be the same type. So a 1 that's represented as an integer and the number 1 that's represented as a float is not going to be the same. Not identical is sort of the opposite of that, and not identical, well, first of all, identical is represented by 3 equal signs. That's the identical comparison operator. The not identical comparison operator is an exclamation point followed by 2 equal signs. And basically what the not identical one does is it compares the two values, and if they're not identical, meaning if they're not the same value and they're not the same type, it's going to return false. So for example, if we have down here we have a variable a and we're setting it equal to 1, the numeric value 1, we have a float that also is the number 1. So numerically they're equal. So if we come down here to this first comparison and we use just the regular equal comparison operator from before, that just evaluates the numbers based on their value. Since they both have the same numeric value 1, this is going to return true. However, if we use the identical operator, which is 3 equal signs, it's going to return false, because even though they have the same numeric value, they have different data types. So here they were both value of 1 numerically, but one was an integer and one was a float. So let's look at some examples of that as well. On the same script, we have the identical and non-identical operator examples down here. As you can see from before, the integer 1, it's testing whether it's equal to 1.0, and it returns true because they're both numerically 1. The values are both the same. Here, we use the identical operator. It compares 1. Is it identical to 1? The answer is true because they're both integers and they're both equal to the value of 1. Down here, we compare the integer 1 to the float 1.0, and as we mentioned, that's going to return false because even though they have the same numeric value, they are of different data types. And not identical works in the opposite way. So for example, we have the not equals operator. 1 is not equal to 1. That's false because their values are the same. And we could say 1 is not equal to 1.0, and that will return false because the numeric values are the same, so they are equal. So not equal returns false. However, if we do 1 is not identical to 1.0, it's going to return true because not only because in order for that to return false, they have to have the same value and be of the same data type. In this case, they have the same value, but they're not the same data type, so they're not identical. It's going to return true. So now we're going to talk about the null data type. And null is a special data type. It doesn't fall into the scalar or composite data type categories. And basically what the null data type is used for is for variables that have no value. Now a variable always has to have a data type to be used, whether it's an integer, a float, an array. So, we just learned about the Boolean. But if there is no value assigned to a variable, sort of the absence of a value is considered its own data type, and that data type is null, which is basically null is the absence of a value. There's one null literal to assign. If you want to assign a value, make a variable equal to null, or make it of the null data type, you assign it the special keyword null. And again, like true and false, it's case insensitive how it's interpreted by PHP, and the convention again is to either use all uppercase or lowercase letters. And so the way you can have a variable be equal to null, meaning it has no data type, is you can specifically assign it the literal value null, or two other options. You can create the variable and not assign a value to it. For example, we could just have a statement that's a followed by a semicolon, assuming we've never declared a before in in our script, A is going to have the value of null because we haven't set a value to it. The other thing is if we have a variable that has already had a value and we want to make it null, we want to have it so that it has no value, we can use the unset construct, which looks like this. And basically what you do is you pass the variable that you want to set to null into it, and then that variable is now no longer set and it's equal to null. Now that we've learned about comparison operators, we can actually make use of them, the equality operator, and a common operation is to compare variables to null. And that's basically like, say we have a variable num1 and we want to see whether it actually has it's associated with a number yet. If it's been initialized, we can say num1, is it equal to null, when using this using the equal to operator. And if it is equal to null, that's going to return true, and if it's not, it's going to return false. And so that's a common comparison we're going to do, and let's take a look at a script that does that. We have a script called null.php. And here we have 3 different variables. We have a variable called val1, and here we explicitly set it to null, the null literal, in the all capitalized version, which is what we're going to use in this course. And so that means that val1 is a null data type. It has no value associated with it. The other thing that we can do to get a variable to be a null data type is just declare it but not initialize it. So here we've declared val2, a new variable, hasn't been used in the script before, but we didn't assign it a value, so therefore its value is null. The other thing that we can do to give a variable the null data type is to unset it. And so here we have a variable val3 that had a value 1, and now we want to unset it so it can't be used and set it equal to null. We pass it to this unset construct, and simply the way you do that is you write unset, and then in between parentheses you put the name of the variable. So after having done all 3 of these declarations and this unset, we can compare each of these vals, each of these variables, to null to see if they actually are null as we expect them to be. So down here there's 3 separate operations, and this is we're starting to use the comparison operator already, and we're saying, is val1, is it equal to the null literal, meaning is it equal to null? And because this is a comparison operation, it returns true or false. So if it is equal to null, it's going to return true, and if it's not equal to null, it's going to return false. Because we had just explained that these 3 ways are how you set a variable to null, we expect that all of these to be equal to true. And if we go and load the page, which is going to output these 3 Boolean variables that we have, is null1, is null2, and is null3. And we can see that when we explicitly set something to null, val1 equals null, and we set is null equal to the result of comparing val1 to null, we see that is null1 is true because this value is equal to null. Now we have the val2 variable, which had been declared but not initialized. We test if that's equal to true, and the output of that is that it is true, it is equal to null. And then the third way to set something to null is use the unset function for a variable that's previously been initialized. And so we had val3 who had the value of 1. Now we unset it, and when we compare val3 to null, we get the result is true. So real quick, just want to mention the coding conventions that we're going to use in this course. For both the Boolean literals and the null literal, we're always going to use the all uppercase versions of these. These are the 2 Boolean ones, and that's what we're going to use for null. And that's probably the most common convention out there. Additionally, we had mentioned that the not equal operator has another version, which is this less than greater than operator. And in this course, we're always going to use the exclamation point equal version of that operator, and that's the more common one used. So for homework, I just want to have you go over the comparison operations .php page and make sure you understand how all the different comparisons work, the greater than or equal to, the greater than, equal, not equal, and so forth, as well as the identical ones, to make sure you understand the subtle difference between the equal operator and the identical operator, and also between the not equal operator and the not identical operator. So that's in comparisons ops.php, which is one of the scripts we just learned. And also have you just review null.php, the script that we just looked at, and the slide on the null data type to make sure you understand the concept of null, which is basically the absence of a value, and to see the 3 different ways in which a variable can end up with the value null, or with the data type null. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching educator.com. Look forward to seeing you at the next lesson.